Have you ever heard a senior advocate who has been the law officer for the central government say that the central government, or the government of India, was only a client for the lawyer? Well, Senior Counsel Aman Lekhi, who recently stepped down from the post of the Additional Solicitor General of India, says this to us in this exclusive. Senior Advocate Lekhi is with us today to not only speak about the contentious topic about his resignation from the coveted post, but also on a host of issues. So the 2020 Delhi riots cases had hogged most of the time of the trial courts and the Delhi High Court in the past 2 years, and you were a very prominent face in those litigations before the Delhi High Court. So this question assumes importance. How do you think the prosecution fared in the Delhi riots cases? How do you look at it overall now?
No, as far as the cases are concerned, admittedly there was violence. There was arson, and there was also spewing of hate. A situation like this invites attention. And when it invites attention, invariably, it will attract legal provisions. While you are invoking law, however, and that's what I had even argued when I was arguing before the Delhi High Court in this matter, you don't argue for othering anyone. You don't argue for the purposes of bringing some kind of division or segregation.
Right.
You do not argue for prioritizing a particular view or privileging a particular community. You argue basically to ensure that what is being stated is something which can actually be accepted by a court. Okay. When I dealt with these matters, I confined myself only to the issue which was before the court. And as far as those matters are concerned, a lawyer's job is to present the facts.
Okay.
Now, when you present the facts, and the lawyer's responsibility is basically to present the facts without coloring the facts, and not present the facts also in a motivated manner as to distort the perspective. Yeah. And that is the reason why I had actually told the court, while dealing with it in the matter which is now in the Supreme Court, that there are loonies in every community. And I say that rather openly. And it is for the responsible in the society to stand up and be counted. Because if you let the loonies reign free, then there'll be absolutely no society left for such of them who are responsible enough, and who will be responsible would be those who keep quiet. So as a consequence is necessary, you make a point. And there comes the role of the court. A judge always knows that when a position is taken, there's always a contrary position to the position stated. There comes the responsibility of the court to see through the contest and be aware of the larger picture, to bring about through its decisions a resolution which would be appropriate in the circumstances.
Right.
Because what binds is the order. What is law is not the argument. What is law is not the submission. What is law is the finding.
Right.
And it is that which has an element of sanctity to it. And because it is something very akin to being sacred, the responsibility in dispensing it becomes very real. So in this entire exercise, I personally think the buck stops with the court. The lawyers will argue. They are adversaries in a particular contentious matter, and it's necessary that both points of view have play. But while the points of view may have play in the argument, what actually binds will be the judgment. And there comes the role of the court. And I think the role of the court is absolutely the most important. When you talk about the Delhi riots, we have to talk about not just the lawyers, because the lawyers will take positions which may at times be partisan, may not always be correct, maybe in some way by reason of a misadventure or ill advice of whatever is done. The record may not be speaking what may have actually happened. But it is for the other side to contest, and basically for the court to court to decide and for justice to prevail. So the responsibility, I always say, I mean, as an institution, the most important institution today for us is the court. And that responsibility cannot be shared by it with anyone, nor can it be made subordinate to anything.
So you took charge as Additional Solicitor General in 2018. How has been the experience so far arguing for the central government?
Oh, it's been a wonderful experience. I have enjoyed my journey as a law officer. It was something very new and extremely different. And while I look back at what I did, I feel that while the position gave me a lot of opportunity, there could have been ways in which it could have been made more fulfilling. But then that is a question of a personal choice. And as far as lawyers are concerned, the lawyers always seek more. At times, what they seek more is perhaps a selfish desire. At other times, the need to seek more is because of the necessity that more be sought. So there'll always be something in my heart in which I would say I could have done more, which I could not and which I did not. But then that's my personal opinion.
The question on everyone's lips, why did you resign?
Well, first of all, you see, my resignation is motivated by considerations in many ways which are completely subjective. And as the position itself warrants, I'm not obliged to justify my resignation. I, however, feel that if you are consumed by the post, at some point of time, you become very cavalier in your approach. And then the performance is one which is very unedifying. If you reach a point where you feel that holding the post defeats the purpose behind your holding it, and while holding the post, you may not be as effective as you want in dispensing the duties which the post entails, then rather than compromise or live with compromise or have a trade-off of continuing with a feeling of deficiency about your performance, the right thing is to resign. So I chose that option because I felt that I, in my stint, did whatever maximum I could do. And despite my desire, as I said, could be misplaced in many ways, to do more, I could not get an opportunity to do more or use this office for purposes I thought it could legitimately be put to. So I decided simply to give my resignation.
Just probing a little further, why did you think you were not able to do your, like you said that, there's something which a lawyer wants to be fulfilled and, it couldn't happen with this.
No, it's nothing. It's just, this is a personal opinion.
Okay.
You see, everyone has got in many ways an exaggerated notion about their own importance, me included. So when you have that kind of a disproportion in your imagination, at that point of time, the dispensation gets distorted. So my view of things could be in some way affected by my assumption in myself of a capacity which perhaps I may be lacking. And for that reason, to seek something which is beyond my ken. That might be the reason. It is for the government to decide how much I work. It is for the government to decide who does what.
Right.
It is not for a lawyer to seek work. I have never sought. I don't think it behoves. I have always treated the government as a client. It's not as if I think it's the job of a lawyer to advise. It's not the job of a lawyer to be advised. You will hear what your client says, and on the basis of what the client says, you'll advise your client what, in your opinion, is the best option available. It is for the client to choose your advice or disregard it. If the client chooses to disregard that advice, then that is the sole discretion of the client.
Right.
The lawyer has got absolutely no role to play in that. The duty of a lawyer ends with the advice.
So you say that the independence of legal opinion of a law officer of the central government remains intact.
No, absolutely. As far as I am concerned, at no point of time ever did I compromise with that, or I was ever made to change an opinion of mine. I must put that on record. As I told you in the beginning, I have very strong convictions. Whatever I did, I chose to do on the term which I thought were correct, and I carried it into my resignation too, because I felt a time had reached where it would be better that I demit office.
Did you receive any calls and messages from judges or lawyers asking you to reconsider this call?
Well, of course, yes. It was not judges. The judges have no role to play here. This is purely, yes, of course. I was told. And no uncertain terms. I was requested, but I always feel there's a right time for anything,
right?
And if that time is missed, a right thing at the wrong time is never right, because at that point of time, its acceptability gets very suspect. Having taken this decision for reasons which are very personal, to revisit that particular decision would have been incorrect in every way, because if I believe what I did was right, I cannot change that particular decision merely on a request, because that will put into a rather serious doubt my faith in my own convictions, and which I will never at any point of time doubt.
My last question on this entire resignation aspect: do you feel more freer now?
I'm always clear. There's
I said freer.
No, I was always free. I mean, if I wasn't free, I would not have resigned. I have always chosen to be free. No one has. I mean, I do not think it is in my nature to be either enslaved or to be barricaded into a situation, or be barricaded by circumstance. I'm always free. I mean, I'm free even now. As far as law is concerned, as I told you, I'm very fond of law. And as long as I'm free to practice law, as I am, as far as freedom is concerned, I'll be free always. I had the same freedom from the other side, and I have freedom now.
So since you're no longer associated with the central government, I would sincerely urge you to put forth your opinion on this entire hijab controversy. Put it in a very simple, this entire hijab controversy, I wanted your opinion as a legal professional, senior legal professional. And my question is very simple. Can students be prevented to wear religious symbols in classrooms?
You see, I would not frame this controversy as one relating freedom of religion. I would put it more as speech. And when I put it as speech, I personally think it will have better resonance than religion, because religion becomes a very emotive aspect. And as soon as religion assumes center stage, then the polarization becomes rather severe.
Right.
I feel that we have to see this entire controversy in the context, the prism of speech, subject to whatever limitations they are on speech.
Okay.
When they are subject to limitations on speech, you cannot have the license to do what you want. At the same time, the prohibition on your choosing to speak cannot be unreasonable. Unless, of course, there's breach of order. I am at a personal level a wholehearted supporter of freedom of speech. I do not, at a personal level, subscribe to the example of the French society, because I think the Indian society is very different. We are far more spiritually engaged than the other societies. And our model of secularism does not entail a complete divorce from religion.
Right.
And because it does not entail divorce from religion, we cannot import concepts from milieus which are very different. And we have to, in some way, indigenize our jurisprudence to suit it to the circumstances. You cannot use hijab either as a weapon of religiosity, nor also politics. And we have to see how this controversy evolved, why it evolved, and what was the reason for it coming. Because the problem today is that emotive issues are being taken not because of the worth of the issue, but basically as a ploy to motivate different sections towards particular agendas. And because that is so, my objection is not to hijab as such. I do not think merely wearing a hijab by itself is something subject, of course, to the basic principle that you don't wear hijab for making a point or consciously or deliberately violating a rule. You do it for a reason which you can justify, not as a ploy or not as a tool for an agenda. That is my view on this. That said, all of us are entitled to dress and be what we are without any limitations which are in some way excessive or unnecessary.
Right.
And must be careful to ensure that the feeling of community, which is absolutely indispensable for any nation, is not unnecessarily hampered or hindered through trivialities which are made into big issues only for serving political agendas on both sides.
Right.
So it is extremely important, as I said in the beginning, that in each community,
Right.
there has to be a complete sense of proportion
Yeah.
and a realization that we are not puppets of anyone, but very responsible people on our own, committed to our country and to each other. And once that sense is there, the balance in our dealings will itself ensure that the harmony which is necessary in our interaction is in some way sustained. I always see this as speech, and it should actually be treated as such. What is missed and what can create problems here is not just hijab, it can be parda, it can be other malpractices in different communities, like dowry, like child marriage, like anything else. It's not as if all ills are in one community. What happens to these measures is we give something which is retrogressive respectability. And it is very dangerous for a country to give respectability to regress. We have to progress forward. And this problem comes in because we close ranks because of our own insecurities and feel that because of the assault, we have to protect. And because there's a need to protect, you exclude influences which are to reform or to reach out.
Right.
And when that happens, the problem gets exacerbated. My problem with hijab is because it is framed as a religious issue and has polarized, it is seen by communities as one on which survival hinges. And once that is so, then measures which will in fact be rather detrimental in the long run get a respectability. And it's so obvious to anyone who sees this. Everything cannot be done through court, nor law, nor even mandate or orders or rules.
Right.
We have to understand that. And if we assume that, yes, it is through that only we are being foolish, And you are actually missing the point altogether. I personally think those in the Muslim community, I don't like to use the Muslim community. I don't like Hindu community. I don't like Muslim community. That brings, I mean, that brings in a division in the mind.
Mind itself, yeah.
We have to combine to do what is best for all of us as a people. And while doing so, we have to keep our divisions aside.
Right.
Because if we have divisions, we do not have a future. And I am a firm believer in our future. And because I'm a firm believer in our future, I personally think that the belief should overcome the divisions.
Right. So how do you analyze the situation of freedom of press and expression in the country at the moment?
Freedom of press, there's freedom. There'll always be freedom. We are a constitutional polity. We are governed by the rule of law. The only restraint on freedom is fear. Those who complain are actually cloaking their fear for their omission to speak. If you are fearless, a system will survive. There is, as far as our system is concerned, there are enough provisions in it, and it has got enough vitality to stand up for those who claim that freedom. But it can stand up only for those who claim the freedom, not to those who, for reasons only they understand, choose not to invoke it. So if you behave in a cowardly manner, in that event, any kind of repression which is in fact put on you is something which you invite because you choose not to stand up.
Right.
And as long as you have the spine, the spunk, and the guts to stand, the system will always protect. And there can be no strength bigger than the system which we have, and a capacity to invoke it should remain perpetually intact. I have never, my father, before all these, it became a fad, these public interest educations came.
Yeah.
Before we had this term called activist or activism. He was an activist at a time with no media, with no protection. And he was a fearless man who followed his convictions. And no system, he worked across many governments. No government could ever stifle his voice. Why? Because he was fearless. And it behoves all of us to be fearless. If we are fearless, there's nothing at all which can stop our voice from being heard or us to speak. It's a question of personal choice, what you want to be. You want to be a coward? The choice is yours. Don't blame the system.
There is an assumption that a lot of important constitutional law matters, whether it be Article 370 abrogation or Citizenship Amendment Act or sedition, is practically lying in cold storage. As a law professional, do you think it's time to hear these issues on priority?
So every matter has to be heard, no question about that. As far as the sequence of hearing is concerned, that's the discretion of the court. And the question would be better put to those who manage the roster than those who have to argue the matter as to what is happening. As far as sedition is concerned, at a personal level, I do not join the bandwagon saying that this is an ultra vires section, but not for the reason the Supreme Court has given. I personally, and I'm very familiar with the history of this particular section and the purpose, as also the judgments which are there. My views on 370 are also well known because as far as that matter is concerned, the link and the necessary link, the integral part of Kashmir with India is something which is not to be doubted or disputed. That said, because I'm convinced of my position, it is necessary that I be in a position to vindicate it. And the problem which the so-called delay causes is that it gives grist to the mill, which seems to suggest that there's some inherent weakness in these issues. So that in some way motivates the criticism of a section of people to gain legitimacy insofar as the accusation of these measures being legally suspect is concerned.
Right.
I would want such matters to be heard, not because there's any priority in the matter for the court to decide a priority, because the hearing of the matter itself vindicate the position that the position which is being taken, whether it's 370 or sedition, is in fact right. Delaying it may seem to give the impression that there's something to hide, or there's some kind of reluctance to defend, and that does a fair amount of damage to the cause. If you take a decision, you have to be sure of the legal merit in it, as not to be in any way wary of a challenge to it, and on the contrary, it should be welcome for the purpose of establishing for all times to come that a challenge to these positions is in fact utterly unwarranted. Because we delay, because we evade, because we do not confront, it gives potency to a view which in my opinion is rather harmful to our country, and gives voice to a section which I feel is better addressed by calling their hoax.
And before we wrap up, I think we skipped a question on sedition law. You had hinted that your take on sedition law was very clear. What is it, sir?
No, I personally think, speaking myself, I think it is very important that this section remains. That said, I have that for a different occasion. Many of the arguments which have been raised against it, in my opinion, in law are misconceived. That said, I am also aware that the problem in provisions is not so much the content of the section, but the frequency of the invocation. So, because these are serious offenses meant for rather grave situations, such of us who invoke it must not trivialize it by invoking such provisions to situations which do not necessarily warrant the invocation. Subject to that caveat, I am at a personal level completely in favor of retention of this particular provision, and I feel that in the environment we are living in, and not just India, sedition is to have as a provision a subject dealing with sedition is absolutely obligatory for any penal system. And to say that there can be no sedition law is something I balk at, because I personally think this is libertarianism in the extreme and cannot possibly be justified in any sense on the broader principle of liberalism, which is actually invoked to in some way justify the criticism.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lekhi, for being with us here today. It was a real pleasure to have you on Bar and Benches Interview.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel and click the bell icon.